Russia's invasion of Ukraine sparks inflation. The UN condemns Russia. Biden's first State of the Union address. And more on this week's headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Colorado residents who lost their homes last year in a massive wildfire are now rebuilding. However, they may wind up having to pay tens of thousands of dollars extra due to new environmentally conscious building codes. The mayor of Louisville, Colorado, a city near Denver, said, "I understand that in this circumstance it's putting a lot of pressure on families, but the biggest source of carbon emissions in our state are from buildings and transportation, and we are in a climate crisis." You probably shouldn't start a statement by essentially saying, "I'm sorry you lost your home, all your possessions, memories, and even your pets," but just think about our air quality and how one day in the future it could possibly maybe get slightly worse. Quit being so selfish. On the bright side, they'll get to enjoy that pristine air quality a lot more, since these expensive new building requirements might force some people to live outdoors permanently. Speaking of steep price increases, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has caused prices to rise in America for things like food and gasoline. To combat rising gas prices, the U.S. and its allies announced on Tuesday they will release 60 million barrels of oil from their reserves. As of this recording, the national average gas price is over $3.83 a gallon, causing most U.S. residents to freak out and causing most California and New York residents to look at them and say, "First time?" However, U.S. crude oil prices still rose 11% on Tuesday to nearly $106 a barrel, the highest it's been since 2014. And many consumer product companies are raising their prices to try and offset inflation, with Colgate introducing a new premium toothpaste that costs $10. All this inflation at least finally answers that age-old question, war, huh, yeah, what is it good for? Corporate profits. It's enough to make you want to get drunk, but even that will cost extra, since beer prices may increase since so much barley comes from Ukraine. More after the break. Welcome back. The UN General Assembly overwhelmingly voted to demand Russia cease aggressions against Ukraine. The vote to condemn Putin was 141-5, with 35 nations abstaining. This resolution isn't binding, so there's nothing the UN can actually do about Russia invading Ukraine. It's basically just a symbolic gesture. Although as symbolic gestures go, at least it was better than OnlyFans changing their logo to the colors of the Ukrainian flag. That should be their new motto. The United Nations, at least we're better than OnlyFans. According to the U.S. ambassador to the UN resolution was important because it demonstrated that Russia is isolated and alone, and that the costs will keep rising until Russia relents. But Russia isn't technically alone. There were 4 countries that sided with Russia by voting against this measure. Those are Belarus, Syria, North Korea, and Eritrea. Although if those are your only allies, you'd be better off being isolated and alone. This is like finding out the only people who think you're right are Voldemort, Immortan Joe, and Jake Paul. You're definitely not the good guy here. Speaking of symbolic gestures, Iowa, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New Hampshire have banned Russian vodka as a symbolic gesture in support of Ukraine. Utah also banned Russian vodka, but no one really noticed since that state is so full of so many Mormons that they consider soda to be naughty. Having a bad Coke habit in Salt Lake City is actually way cuter than it sounds. The Biden administration also increased sanctions against Russia early on Monday, banning Americans from doing business with Russia's central bank. Directly targeting Russia's central bank is a pretty big move. The Biden administration also sanctioned Russian oligarchs this week. I'm sure they'll miss their super yachts. While many lauded the Biden administration for sanctions, Justin Trudeau probably thought, oh, so they freeze the financial assets of people they disagree with and they're heroes. But when I do it, I'm a tyrant? Trudeau really has egg on his face right now, which is actually the least politically damaging thing he's had on his face. Visa and MasterCard blocked services to Russian banks that were sanctioned, and several oil companies are in the midst of pulling out of Russia. And possibly most damaging of all, Adidas suspended its partnership with the Russian football union. Look, you can destroy the Russian economy and no one there will bat an eye. Historically, living in a devastated economy is kind of what makes Russia Russia. You can hit their finances all you want, but when you take away Adidas, you hit their fashion, nay, their way of life. Now, if we can just create a tracksuit shortage in Russia, there will be full-scale riots and Putin will be overthrown by the end of the week. And don't worry, rebuilding the Kremlin after a fire won't be nearly as expensive as it would be in Colorado. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signed an application requesting that Ukraine be allowed to join the European Union. This was confirmed by a photo posted by the Ukrainian Prime Minister on Twitter. So if you think it's bad when you're on a first date and they can't stop messing around on their phone, this guy's doing it in the middle of a war. Social media addiction is real, folks. Ukrainian President Zelensky said, "We appeal to the European Union to urgently admit Ukraine using a new procedure. We are grateful to partners for standing with us, but our goal is to be with all Europeans and to be equal to them. I'm sure we deserve it. I am sure it is possible." However, Ukraine doesn't currently meet the standards for entering the EU, and admittance to the EU requires unanimous approval, to which Zelensky should have responded, "Well, can we just have the UK's old membership since they didn't want it?" I can understand the EU's hesitation, though. If they let Ukraine in, it could set a precedent. After all, if a nation is let in to help them stop an unpopular leader with authoritarian tendencies from destroying their country, then it won't be long until the EU receives an application from Canada. And after the break, students in the U.S. may finally be able to breathe again. Welcome back. Mask mandates were lifted for school children in Washington, Oregon, and California, with the governors from all three states saying in a joint statement, with declining case rates and hospitalizations across the West, California, Oregon, and Washington are moving together to update their masking guidance. While this makes many parents and students happy, I'm actually sad to hear this news, because it means we'll no longer get to see concerts that look like this. That's my jam. Those were the best musical performances I've seen since I watched a guy play guitar while wearing boxing gloves. Mask mandates were also lifted last weekend at the Capitol. Many questioned the science behind the Capitol mask mandates being lifted days before the State of the Union address. This move was in accordance with updated guidelines posted by the CDC last Friday. Some accused Biden of manipulating the CDC to make himself look better ahead of his speech. Press Secretary Jen Psaki responded to this saying, "I would say the president is powerful, but it had nothing to do with the timing around the State of the Union." Wait, they thought President Biden could make the CDC change their recommendations? Who do they think Biden is? The CEO of Delta Airlines? Also, members of Congress not wearing masks isn't going to make Joe Biden seem more powerful or make him look better. To do that, you'd need the whole CGI department at Marvel. President Biden attempted to project power and confidence as he delivered his first State of the Union address on Tuesday, where he said combating inflation is his top priority, and he promised to inflict pain on Putin. Economically, of course. In a one-on-one fight, I don't like Biden's chances. Biden also announced that Russian planes would be banned from U.S. airspace, which means there will be real supply chain disruption, especially for Russian mail-order brides. Guess they'll just have to be sent over via boat. Biden received a bipartisan standing ovation when he said he wants to secure the border and fix the immigration system. He received another standing ovation for his statements on funding the police. Biden also led Congress in a standing ovation for Ukraine. With all the constant standing up and sitting down, I'm not sure if the State of the Union address is a better speech or quad workout. Biden's inflicting more pain on Congress than he is on Putin right now. Biden also tried gaining bipartisan support when he asked to put the party's differences aside regarding COVID.
Let's use this moment to reset. So stop looking at COVID as a partisan dividing line. See it for what it is. A god-awful disease. Let's stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other for who we are, fellow Americans.
Which is a wonderful sentiment if he said this before saying last fall that Republican governors were playing pandemic politics and making people sick and causing the unvaccinated to die. Yeah, maybe a reset is a smart idea after that. Honestly, given how things have been going, I wouldn't mind a reset on this entire decade so far. Whoever's running this simulation, I hope January 1st, 2020 was a checkpoint and we can just do this all over. The U.S. trucker convoy that hoped to reach Washington, D.C. in time for Biden's State of the Union speech didn't make it, with barely anyone showing up to the protest. But while many media sources may dismiss the U.S. Freedom Convoys as non-existent, that's not exactly true. According to organizers of the protests, one of the main groups that started in Los Angeles quickly fizzled out, but there are other groups still in motion. The launch in California had a good turnout of supporters, but only 5 trucks were with us on arrival in Vegas. There are 2 other convoys that have massive turnouts and are in progress to the D.C. area as we speak. Leave it to Californians to be flaky when it comes to making plans. However, there are several trucker convoys still making their way to the D.C. area. The largest seems to be the People's Convoy, which has been on the road for about a week. It's hard to tell how big their convoy is, but according to their own social media, they seem to have a few thousand people at least at their rallies. The People's Convoy aims to be in the Washington, D.C. area by Saturday, although they've said they will not actually enter D.C. These trucker convoys are protesting COVID mandates that have by and large already been lifted, even in the capital, as I mentioned. So their protest seems, well, a little late. But remember, they consider themselves patriots, and a union composed of members from several different regions that are disorganized, don't know how to properly communicate with each other, and are trying to accomplish something anyway, that sounds like the most American thing ever. So what do you think about the stories we covered this week? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, America Uncovered is supported mainly by viewers. Be sure to visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered and contribute $1 or more per episode because we rely on your support to help us keep making great episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.